I just want to tell you that America is the greatest place on earth.
Shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a man who does not exist. A young loner on a crusade to champion the cause of the innocent, the helpless, the powerless, in a world of criminals who operate above the law.
Hey, it's me, and welcome to this video. Happy Independence Day 2024. But it's really a time where you see a repeat of history. We're living under a tyranny right now, which is very similar to our situation when the original Declaration of Independence was written, mostly authored by Thomas Jefferson, a person that the elitists in DC really hate because he and others were outlining the grievances. For example, in Common Sense, authored by Thomas Paine, a lot of that had to do with the corrupt legal system, something that we're seeing right now with the lawfare, but also excessive fines like the Engoron decision to fine the Trump organization, but also the imprisonment of political prisoners, which is what we're seeing with the J6 prisoners. We're talking about the corrupt left and the Rhino Republicans colluding, and they have a junta, a kind of coalition, a tyranny, really. And it isn't much different from what we had back then. We had King George III, who was mentally ill. At some point, he was shaking hands with a tree somehow, thinking it was the King of Prussia, which reminded me of Biden shaking hands with an invisible person after ending remarks. And he did that twice, by the way. Maybe he really thought there was someone there. Maybe he was shaking hands with a demon that we cannot see. But we're talking about a mentally ill person, incapacitated. And the Prince of Wales, the son, became the Prince Regent, and he was a complete idiot, which reminded me of crackhead Hunter Biden showing up at all the top-level meetings recently at the White House as a senior advisor to the president, making decisions that affect the USA. Yeah, unelected and unappointed. I mean, just the son, right? It also kind of reminded me of Saddam Hussein and Uday Hussein. But more than that, it's very similar to what we had with the British in the colonies, the methods, the hatred against the American people, the tyranny, the lack of freedom. And of course, the Declaration of Independence does mention that if the government becomes destructive, it is the right for people to overthrow the government. So often you hear Joe Biden talking about F-15s or F-16s when he talks about Thomas Jefferson, and he's laughing at the American people that they have no power to do anything about what is going on. But we still have the power of the vote, but also popular opinion. As you can see, everybody is realizing that Joe Biden isn't all there, and that the media has been lying. Democrats have been lying. Even Rhino Republicans have not done a thing to help the American people. And so now, of course, similar to King George III taxing the hell out of Americans in the colonies to fund all their wars overseas, we have the Biden regime and the Rhino Republicans combining to send all of our money, billions and billions and billions, to Israel, to Hamas, to Ukraine, and African nations and Taiwan. And it's so similar to a foreign nation really occupying our colonies and taxing Americans to fund wars for their empire. So what we're seeing is that the Biden regime is not American in nature. It is oppressive. It's a tyranny, and it's a tyranny of a minority, right? So they are completely out of sync with the American people, out of touch, and they have an attitude, meaning they want to impose their will and control, and they laugh at the attempts of the American people to reach for freedom. And so the Declaration of Independence, authored by Thomas Jefferson, was a remarkable founding document where you can understand the need for the American people to get away from tyranny, that our nation was really born out of a desire to escape tyranny and to counter tyranny. And we have tyranny right now. So as per the founding documents, our duty, our obligation, and our instinct is to rebel against the tyranny of the Biden regime and these corrupt swampers in the deep state. And so President Trump is our man, and he has to be in the White House. I only worry about if his term is finished, will there be another Trump? Because we need somebody who's a real conservative like President Trump. I never heard any of these other so-called conservatives talk about eliminating the income tax or even taxes on tips and getting rid of all the regulations, because most people that run for president end up being puppets, and they just go with what the deep state wants. And we're talking about control, totalitarianism, whether it's fascism or communism. It's all left-wing big government stuff, and it's quite the opposite of the spirit of the Declaration of Independence and the forming of our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That's why the left and many rhinos are always attacking the amendments, and especially the First Amendment and Second Amendments, because that really limits them. It's an obstacle for them on their path to have totalitarian control. And that's why they want to get rid of the Electoral College. That's why they're always talking about democracy, which is really mob rule. And they refuse to accept that we are a constitutional republic, which is a type of democracy, but it's using representative government. And maybe it's a little bit too complicated for some of the low IQ people on the left, but it is what it is. And this is how we were founded. The founding documents are clear. But the left sees the founding documents as a tyranny. Yeah, they see democracy, mob rule as being the only path forward. That is because if you leave it up to all of the states and the American people, the left would not be in power. So they have to cheat, they have to manipulate, they have to come up with scams and cons and schemes, they have to fearmonger, whether it's about racist hordes out there targeting Democrats, or whether it's a virus, some pandemic that's coming, or if it's about the weather. Yeah, in fact, if you really look at the talking points, the Biden regime is campaigning not against Trump, they're campaigning against the weather. Yeah, I know, it's stupid. But these people are stupid. You know, if you go back, like way back to the Stone Age, you had BLMers living in a cave, and there would always be like some kind of a shaman or a witch doctor, and he would predict the weather. Or some of them would even say they could control the weather if only the behaviors of the other people in the cave would be acceptable. So a weirdo like that would really get laid a lot, you know, like, hey, if all of you girls blow me, maybe the weather will be better, right? So that's what happened. And so this kind of a scam continued throughout the ages. And you always had people out there, whether it's a rain dance man in Africa or some kind of a professor that is coming out with data, you know, they want to manipulate people. And so the climate change stuff, it's really more of that. And of course, YouTube, you know, if you talk about climate change, they usually put a disclaimer on the video saying the United Nations says that climate change is this and that and the other thing. This is the same United Nations that is pro-Hamas, And we're not talking about decent people, right? So is that really the authority that we're supposed to follow? F, the United Nations, I say. And that is also in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence. F, the UN, F, the WEF, F, the EU, and even the Five Eyes, and all of those countries overseas that are using our money, Israel and Ukraine, but even groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Even Iran is getting our money, if you can believe that. And Taiwan, give me a break. I'm so sick and tired of Taiwan. And all of these puppets that are supposedly for Taiwan or for freedom or democracy, they're supporting the terrorism of Hamas and Hezbollah, financing it. And they're all puppets for China, taking money from China. Joe Biden is really kind of like a viceroy or some kind of a puppet that works for China. He's being bought. The whole Biden crime family has been bought by foreign nations, including China. So these people don't care about the American people. They don't care about American sovereignty. And they don't care about American independence. Like I said, they often laugh about it. Look, those American people, they want freedom. They don't even have F-16s. But we do. We're paying for the military. It's taxpayer money. And we're still a constitutional republic. We have F-16s. And Biden is only there temporarily, so he's acting like a king, though. He thinks he's like King George III. And I would say, yeah, he is pretty much like King George III. Mentally ill, low IQ, and his son is a complete idiot. And so what do we do now? Well, obviously, if the election was held in a fair way, President Trump would win in a landslide, maybe even 48 states, because I think like the institutionalized cheating in New York and California cannot be overcome. But I could be wrong. And so what we have is an economy that's in shambles. We have a fascist regime that is laughing at us, wasting our money, opening the border, about to increase taxes like you've never seen, and limiting the American dream, in fact, destroying the very fabric of our society with their perverse and bizarre policies on the social level. But we're also talking about the economic freedom of people that is really limited by the incompetence that these people have. They have no idea what they're doing. The inflation is killing the American people, but also the oppression of a fascist regime, the tyranny that is reminiscent, really, of a time when we were at war against the British and issuing a Declaration of Independence. We are back at square one in many ways, but we have President Trump, who really personifies all of the founding fathers, who fights for the Constitution like nobody else. And the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, we're talking about somebody who really understands what our nation is all about. And that means that by definition he can never be a fascist. The fascism is coming from rhino Republicans and the left because they're big government totalitarians who don't care about the American people. And so as per the Declaration of Independence, we have to step up. And like I said, hopefully the election will be fair, but it's not the end of our struggle. I mean, we're talking about people that will not go quietly. Fascists never go quietly. So they will continue to attack President Trump and the American people. And the next months will be very telling. But even when President Trump is in the White House, they will continue their rebellion, their mutiny, their tyranny, and they will have to be defeated again and again and again. And that is really the story of who we are as the United States. So we are independent, But ever since the Declaration of Independence, you had all of these forces, including Democrats at the time, being opposed to the very creation of the United States, and that continues. So they created a confederacy, they mounted an insurrection against the USA, and then Democrats later on came up with other ways, Counterculture Revolution in the 60s and 70s to try and overthrow the government. You had deep state actors coming up with hoaxes and scams like Watergate, then later on Russiagate. And Reagan was kind of like a breath of fresh air. But even Reagan, rest in peace, was not all that conservative, but he also had a handler, H.W. Bush, who was kind of shoehorned in to the administration, ex-CIA director, and he was there to undercut and undermine Reagan. And so what you had was a mixed bag. President Trump has been the only real conservative president, and that is because he understands what our nation is all about, and he is not being handled. You know, anyone, even the biggest Trump supporters, if they ever say something like, well, he was given bad advice and he made a mistake because his handlers or advisors gave him the wrong advice, that's BS. I mean, these people have Trump derangement syndrome. Trump is no puppet. He does everything by himself. And yes, it's true, some people are too weak and cannot be counted on. Or some people you thought were going to be good turned out to be bad. People that you thought were going to be average turned out to be really good. Even Trump himself said that. And so it's about human nature, right? So, of course, if you look at the whole deal, President Trump knows how to manage it. And that's why we have MAGA. Because if you look at the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and you understand what our nation is all about, if these are your guiding stars, if you will, then you can't go wrong. The problem with the left and with these rhino Republicans is that they're so out of touch. They don't understand the heritage. They don't understand our history. They don't understand the very essence of who we are as a nation. And on the left, many reject it. They see the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence as documents that are harmful. Yeah, that's how out of touch these people are. And it's evil in many ways, but if you understand everything about our nation and the founding of our nation, as President Trump does, and you're guided by God, how can you go wrong? And that's why, you know, President Trump is so successful, because he's obviously chosen by God. You know, he has talents that can be used to make America great again. And of course he will. And so we have many problems because we cannot rely on only one guy who's a very stable genius. It requires all of us to step up, not to be weak, not to surrender and give up, or to be vain or greedy. Sometimes we have to set aside a lot of stuff and focus on what's real. Do we want a future with an America that's real, or do we want to morph into something that we were never supposed to be? Well, if you listen to these media people, the left and even many Republicans, their vision for America is some kind of a cheap knockoff of some European country that is worthless. Whereas when you listen to President Trump, you can see the magic, the beauty, and the potential of an America that will be greater than it's ever been before. And I believe that. And President Trump can deliver that 100%.
Look, I'm not a young guy. That's no secret. Anyway.
Now don't you